Right, welcome back. Mornings at this hour, we shine a spotlight on the creative cultural economy. This is the 16th edition of the FNB Art Joburg, kicks off in September during Heritage Month. Activating Johannesburg's city with art, music, performance, food and fashion every day, perhaps for over the next 16 days. Revelers and emerging cultural practitioners can reach a wider audience of cultural consumers, where Africa's rich and diverse cultural and natural heritage will be on display, perhaps to contribute to sustainable development, poverty reduction, and her overall agency at large. To take this discussion further, Mandla Sibeko, Managing Director of FNB Art Joburg, and Lindokuhle Sobekwa, the 2023 FNB Art Prize Winner and celebrated photographer, joins us in studio for more. A very good afternoon to the both of you, and thank you for your time with us on the SABC.
Thank you so much for having us here.
I want to look at the cultural economy at large. The impact it's having on Africa, perhaps how it's also contributed to Africa's agency. Walk us through what's been unearthed as we edge closer to the 16th edition of the Art Fair.
Look, an art fair obviously creates a marketplace for artists. You know, that's where people actually meet to connect with artists. That's where artists are able to sell. So it's actually an ecosystem on its own. Globally, around the world, almost all the major cities in the world have an art fair, which is a marketplace. So that's really fantastic. But out of that, there are so many other genres. And Johannesburg has been pioneering in many ways. I think it's contributed significantly to kind of putting out quite a lot of these important voices in culture around the world. If you look at the music scene, Black Coffee, the Mapiano music scene is flying all over the world. But when it comes to I guess visual arts, South Africa has been quite privileged in many ways that during apartheid an infrastructure was created, a gallery system was built, and post 1994 this system has really grown to respond to the need of where the world is now shifting, looking at African art. So South Africa is contributing quite significantly without South Africans being aware of it, that when you look around the world, when they start talking about African art, quite a lot of the time they're speaking quite a high percentage towards South Africa. So it is an important sector, creates a lot of jobs. If you look at an art fair alone, most people look at it from the beauty perspective, but they never look at the whole value chain, the ecosystem, the mere fact that thousands and thousands of people actually get employed in the lead up to the fair itself and the construction of the fair, just like many other industries, including theatre and music.
Lindokuhle, I'm going to bring you to the conversation shortly. Mandla, on the back of that, and appreciating art and valuing art, how do we develop or assert a more consensus rather in terms of the approaches in valuing art in this day and age? Like, how do we culturally transform that wealth into economic growth?
Well, we have to first educate ourselves. So an art fair plays quite a pivotal role in education. So when you walk in to an art fair itself, it's the biggest collection of African art. So that alone educates you on the different mediums, the different stories and the different narratives, and of course the different genres. So as South Africans, we really do need to step up. We need to show up, not only you know, in supporting, but we also need to show up economically. We need to really start being assertive in making sure that we buy works from artists such as Lindokuhle, because without them, without our support, he can't put bread on the table with his family. So I think quite a lot of the time art is seen as quite glamorous or as an aesthetic, and people forget that it's actually an economy on its own. Lindokuhle has to feed his family. So I think where we need to show up as South Africans is in really supporting and making sure that as Lindokuhle celebrated, he was already celebrated with the biggest institutions in London. Most South Africans have not celebrated him. So in many ways, we need to find ourselves in a way where we support him so that he can get all the support that he needs locally. Even when that gaze shifts, you know, trends, you know, in the world, they go with trends. You know, there was a moment when people were interested in China. Now they're no longer interested in China, interested in Mexico, then they're interested in Africa. So when that gaze moves, we want to be able to hold Lindokuhle and many other artists and saying, look, we are here to support them.
No, absolutely. And I think it's also about telling our own stories through our own lens, which is something that you've done, you've been celebrated for. And as the recipient this year, how does it feel? What's the inspiration? What's the journey been like for you? On the back of what Mandla echoed, how do you take your cultural wealth and translate it into economic benefits and growth for you as an artist?
Yeah, no, I mean, to start, it's a great honor to have received this, award, And of course, this award means a lot, to me, and of course, it means a lot to the photographic community that, we are being seen, and the work that we do, matters. And of course, yeah, I mean, for me, this has really contributed a lot, in my career, and of course, in how I think about my work, going forward, and of course, it will contribute in terms of the subject matter that I deal with. And yeah.
Well, on the back of that, because it's about storytelling, it's about also helping us see what you see, or bringing that to the fore. I wonder what conversations you want to evoke through your work. What conversations do you want to start? If you have already, how has it evolved as well? I mean, this all adds to our agency as a continent at large.
Yeah. I mean, like, if you look at my early body of work, which dealt with with drugs, you know what I mean? Yeah. So the whole purpose of that body of work was to start this conversation that could probably result into, a solution, or maybe Amachita finding help, to that, And of course, I later on dealt with bodies of work which dealt with disappearance, of my sister. Of course, that was meant, of course, for me, but also for a lot of people who have been affected by such, to actually reflect as well, because for me, it was a huge, sort of therapeutic, body of work which have helped me. I'm sure with other people who can relate to the story, can actually, they can actually benefit from it. And of course, the work that I'm dealing with now, which looks at migration, of course, a lot of South African or people from Johannesburg can relate to that, because it is a place of migrant workers, So, I mean, I wish my work evokes these type of conversations, and of course, things that we cannot talk about, my work can allow, or that platform for us to start having this conversation. So, I mean, that's my goal, and yeah.
Because you're also born after the transition into democracy, and so it's helpful to have that lens come through. Perhaps also manage expectations, given where we are as a country and where we're trying to head. You draw your inspiration from a number of artists as well. Ernest Cole, one such person, actually at the age of 17. How did that also inspire you, and perhaps where to from here?
Yeah, of course, Ernest Cole, I mean, when I started, I was looking at a lot of photographers, but mostly like European photographers. I never knew that like black photographers who look like me are doing this type of work. So Ernest Cole was actually a great reference, from me. And I must say, in South Africa, we are privileged in terms of, the documentary work that, the people who came before us have put, sorry, the footprint that people came before us have laid for us, So, it's a great reference to look back at where the people who came before you have sort of laid the foundation, then, continue, from that. I mean, we are also, as the Born Free generation, have taken from people who were also inspired by people like Ernest Cole, David Goldblatt, and Santu Mufukeng, people like Zanele Mholi, Mikhail Siboski, Sabelo Mulangeni, Chabrani, you can name. So we are taking from them, continuing,
the baton has been handed over somewhat.
Come again?
The baton has been handed over somewhat.
Exactly, yeah.
We're looking at initiatives like the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. Mandla, at this point, how can we leverage off of that, perhaps with the introduction or through the use of the cultural economy? How do we re-look at it, government and private partnerships playing their role?
Look, when it comes to the creative economy, I think we haven't quite discussed the incentives around tax. So quite a lot of trading that happens within the art ecosystem is still riddled with tax problems. So when I traveled to Brazil many years ago, I was quite inspired that they have quite an incentive towards people who buy or collect local artists, which helps to kind of drive an economy. I think we need to offer those kind of things. But at the same time, I'm feeling like conversations around building this really great cultural economy of Africa, kind of like they're not taking place in those places. So it's still seen as a side gig instead as something that's quite central. But also, if you look at South Africa, we're quite lucky because we quite privileged to lead in many industries. And I think we have such a great infrastructure, the theaters of this world. Quite a lot of people take material from here to the world. Dancers, if you look at the dance community in South Africa, most of them don't perform in South Africa. They perform all over Europe the whole year. So we need to be quite careful and look at ways, how can we start to trade with each other? And also to trade with each other as a continent out of poverty. You know, we can't ignore the mere fact that we as a continent still have quite a high percentage of poor people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And those conversations continue. Lindokuhle, I want to congratulate you on your fair. All the best. You obviously also have a solo exhibition coming up. Mandla, the 16th edition. Thank you for your continuous work in flying the flag high for the continent at large. Thank you to the both of you for joining us on the SABC. Lindokuhle Sobekwa is the 2023 FNB Art Prize winner, and Mandla Sibeko, Managing Director of FNB Art Joburg, chatting to us about the art fair that's set to hit Johannesburg come September. Again, thanks to them for their time with us here.